His poll numbers are low, criticism of him run high. But who needs lots of supporters to run for president? But as our Gary Nuremberg tells us, one newspaper is urging Vice President Cheney to seek a job promotion. Gary, with a variety of Republican presidential candidates, why would some be urging the vice president to run?
Maybe because, Suzanne, so many Republicans seem to be humming that old song, "Is That All There Is?" Vice President Cheney was only teasing last Monday.
Reception like that is almost enough to make you want to run for office again.
We think he'd be a good president if he actually won.
In an editorial entitled Cheney's Chance, the New York Sun compared the vice president to announced Republican candidates, writing Mr. Cheney is so much more experienced and shrewd a figure. And managing editor Ira Stoll says Cheney would say what other candidates aren't saying.
President Bush hasn't been perfect, but he's actually been a really good president.
Cheney has said repeatedly he will not run, but Republicans don't seem fired up about those who are running. Republicans have contributed $50 million to presidential hopefuls so far, Democrats $77 million. A CNN opinion research poll last month shows little more than a third of registered Republicans have made their mind up about a presidential choice. 62% said they could change their mind.
They reflect the discontent at this time with the top tier, McCain, Giuliani, and Romney.
Presidential scholar Stephen Hess.
It's not just that they're not catching fire. They're all flawed candidates from the Republican activist point of view.
Which is maybe why possible candidates Newt Gingrich and Fred Thompson are making such broad hints.
There's always room for one more.
But does that include Vice President Cheney? It would be a heck of a campaign, but to quote Mr. Hess, it ain't going to happen. The talk, though, does point to a Republican hunger for something new, and something new in the Republican campaign race, Suzanne, could very well happen.
And Gary, you're absolutely right. Talking to folks in the vice president's office, it ain't going to happen. But it's a very interesting possibility.
It could be fun.
Okay, thanks again, Gary Nuremberg. Now an issue involving a well-known Democrat, Al Gore. A planet in peril and global warming gloom. It's all just ridiculous, says one man. He says all the forecasts for disaster will themselves be disastrous for one American industry. CNN's Carol Costello in New York. Carol, who is making these claims?
Who is making these claims? Well, his name is Bob Murray. He's one of the few CEOs in the coal industry to openly mock Al Gore and what Murray calls militant environmentalism. His words so blunt, he's attracting a lot of attention.
Bob Murray is a coal miner turned CEO of Murray Energy Corporation. He does not hide his disdain for what he calls the global goofiness campaign. You could say he's the anti-Gore.
I would describe Al Gore as the shaman of global goofiness and gloom and doom.
Murray calls Al Gore and his Hollywood friends elitists who see the working class as abstractions to push their agenda. Needless to say, he was not impressed by Gore's testimony before a congressional hearing on global warming.
If the crib's on fire, you don't speculate that the baby is flame retardant. You take action. The planet has a fever.
Murray calls that hysteria, saying Congress doesn't understand the consequences of bills to curb global warming.
Every bill that's been introduced to address it is going to destroy manufacturing jobs in America, is going to raise the electric rates for people on fixed income.
Murray says 52% of our electricity is generated by coal. It's the cheapest way to make it. Environmentalists say it's also the dirtiest way, accounting for a third of carbon dioxide emissions, which many scientists say is the culprit behind global warming. Murray says maybe, but if companies are forced to cut back emissions without needed technology, not now available, manufacturers will simply outsource overseas.
It's a human issue to me, because I live among the people that wear the hard hats. And I saw what happened in 1990 with the Clean Air Act, and this will be much worse. And we must prevent that, because lives will be destroyed for little or no environmental benefit.
We must
must stress that most in the scientific community says global warming does exist and must be dealt with. We also called on Al Gore for a response. His camp reiterates that by saying, to say that this is a debate between former Vice President Al Gore and the coal companies is a mistake. Today, the scientific community has once again spoken loudly and clearly and confirmed that global warming is real, it is caused by human activity, its consequences are serious, and that actions must be taken now to avoid the worst damage. Suzanne?
Well, Carol, does Murray believe that there is any room for compromise here?
You know, he really does. What he's really concerned about are people losing their jobs. If all of these emission controls are being put into place all at one time, he fears that'll be too expensive for companies to absorb. And what happens when that happens? They lay off workers.
Thanks, Carol. And while that energy CEO calls global warming goofy, others say it involves a very grave situation. A new climate report from the United Nations warns that millions of people will go hungry, thirsty, and suffer disease as the world's temperature rises if the world doesn't act. The report warns of rising sea levels swallowing up some coastal cities like New York. Scientists say that climate change could mean a new Dust Bowl, bringing on drought in the Southwest and making it even hotter, and bring on a wave of animal extinction. Experts say polar bears could vanish this century because they will live on ice that will melt.